The man at Willa Thorne's door had 3 days to live. She didn't know that. Didn't know he'd killed to get here. Didn't know she'd love him anyway. The roof leaked. 3 winters since Matthias left for war and never came back. She was 38. Alone, forgotten. She climbed a broken chair, reached for a shingle. The knock came. She fell, hit the floor, threw the door open, furious, bleeding. A giant of a man knelt there, weeping. "No one's ever let me in," he whispered. She should have slammed the door, should have seen the blood on his sleeve, the fear in his eyes, the death following him. But she didn't, because 38 years alone teaches you. The most dangerous thing isn't the stranger at your door, it's the hope he brings. She let him in. 3 days later, a man with a rifle came looking for him, and Willa had to choose her life or his. The roof leaked again, 3 winters now. 3 winters of the same drip in the same corner, landing in the same rusted pot that used to hold soup. Back when soup mattered, Willa Thorne stood on a chair that wobbled. Her fingers were numb. The shingle in her hand felt like ice. Sharp ice. She thought about Matthias, not the man. The promise, "I'll fix it before winter," he'd said. That was 1863. He didn't come back. The war took him. Then a fever took what the war didn't finish. And now it was just Willa. And the roof. And November rain that didn't care about promises. She hammered the shingle, missed. Hit her thumb instead. God damn it. The word came out quiet. Like even her anger was tired. Because that's what 3 years of alone does. It makes you tired. Tired of fighting tin pots and broken wood in a house that wanted to fall down around you, but wouldn't. Which was worse somehow. The knock came just after dusk, low, slow. Like whoever stood out there wasn't sure they deserved to be heard. Willa froze. No one came here. Not this far up the ridge. Not to a woman like her. Not to a house everyone in town called. The widow's mistake. She climbed down from the chair. Her boots hit the floor too loud. Everything was too loud when you lived alone. The knock came again. "Lord," she whispered. "Please let it be someone kind." She opened the door and had to step back, not from fear, from sheer scale. The man before her looked carved from mountain stone. Broad shoulders hunched so he wouldn't scrape the doorframe. Beard thick and dark, wet from the rain, but his eyes. His eyes weren't hard like most men's. They looked like someone had just told him a secret too big to hold. "Ma'am," his voice rumbled. Hat in his hands. Storm's coming. Was wondering if I could. If I might rest here, just till it passes. Willa blinked. Her home had never been anything more than a slant-roofed afterthought. A leftover from Matthias's plans that never finished. From his dreams that died in a field hospital 200 miles away. She swallowed, stepped aside. "You're bigger than my house," she said. Voice barely above the rain, starting to spit outside. That's when the mountain man did something no one expected. He didn't laugh. Didn't flex. Didn't try to squeeze through with pride. He just stood there, 1 second longer, then fell to his knees, eyes filling fast. "Ain't no one," he whispered. Still on the stoop, tears running into the dirt. "Ever let me in without question?" "Not once." Willa froze. What kind of man wept at the door of a shack? What kind of man knelt when others barged in? She didn't know what to do. So she reached out, touched his shoulder. Just lightly. "Storm's not the only thing that needs shelter," she heard herself say. He nodded, but didn't move. She realized he wasn't waiting for her to let him in. He was waiting to be sure it wouldn't hurt her to say yes. So she did. "Come in, mister," softly. "I've got soup if you don't mind it thin. And fire if you don't mind it quiet," as he ducked inside, carefully folding his frame to avoid the sagging beams. Something strange happened. The room didn't feel smaller, it felt warmer. He took the stool without breaking it, hands folded. Like a boy at church. She stirred the pot, tried not to stare. "Name's Caleb," he said after a long silence. "Been living where there ain't much kindness left." Willa met his eyes. "Then maybe you're due for some." But as the wind howled and the door creaked behind him, she noticed something else. His boots were nearly torn through, and a long scrape marred the length of his left arm. She didn't ask about it yet, because something told her there was more under the surface of this giant than hunger and tears. And she wondered, if a man that big had nowhere else to go, what had the world done to him before he knocked? Willa didn't sleep that night. Not really. Not with a man like Caleb beneath her roof. Not with the sound of the storm pressing down on the shingles like fists. And certainly not with the questions crawling through her chest. He lay curled near the stove, arms folded beneath his head, the firelight catching the wet glint in his beard where tears hadn't dried. She hadn't asked why he cried. She hadn't dared. But every so often, she looked at him from her cot in the corner and wondered what it took to bring a man of that size to his knees at a woman's door. At dawn, the wind slowed, and the gray light filtered through her tattered curtain. Caleb stirred, sat up, blinked like he wasn't sure he'd dreamed the whole night. "Didn't mean to take your only fire," he said. "Didn't mean to take your piece." Willa poured the last of the broth into a tin cup, handed it to him without meeting his eyes. "You didn't take anything," she murmured. "You made it feel like someone was watching the place for once." He looked at her like that hurt worse than kindness. Then, quietly, he rolled up his sleeve to reveal the full wound. It wasn't just a scrape. It was a deep, jagged gash, half-healed but infected, surrounded by bruises that looked more like boot marks than brush cuts. Willa stiffened. "Who did that?" she asked, sharper than she meant to. Caleb glanced at the door. "Was working near Dead Man's Hollow. Bunch of fellas caught me passing through." He paused. "Thought I looked like someone else. Decided to teach me something anyway," she swallowed. "You didn't fight back." He gave a slow nod. "Not until they started talking about taking me to the marshal. Said maybe I was the one who stole horses from the McCreary ranch." His voice cracked like firewood. "I ain't touched no one's horses." But they didn't care. He looked down at his hands. They just needed someone to blame. Willa's hands trembled as she knelt beside him with a clean cloth and the last of her boiled pine salve. "Well," she said, dabbing at the wound, "you found the only soul in these woods who's ever been blamed for breathing too loud." She met his eyes. "So maybe you'll stay a bit longer." "Heal up proper." He flinched, but didn't pull away. "You ain't afraid of me?" She looked him dead in the eyes. "I'm afraid of ghosts." "You ain't one." A long silence passed between them, stitched with the soft snap of fire, and the echo of rain easing off the roof. Then quietly, he said, "What happened to your man?" She hesitated. "Mine left me in this shack when I got sick 4 years back. Said the hills were better company." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's a mercy he's gone." Willa didn't reply. She just pressed the cloth gently against his wound and whispered, "Funny how both our scars come from folks who should have known better." In that moment, something shifted. He wasn't a mountain anymore. He was a mirror, and she wasn't ashamed of her tiny house, not with him in it. By morning, the sun broke through for the first time in days, painting gold across the mossy trees. And Caleb stepped outside barefoot, his boots still soaked from the storm. Willa watched him from the crooked porch, arms crossed, unsure if she should feel embarrassed or strangely proud that he was seeing her world without apology. He took a long breath, turned toward her, and said something that made her jaw go slack. "Let me fix it." She blinked. "Fix what?" He pointed at the roof, at the leaning porch rail, at the patch of dirt where the chicken coop used to be. All of it. The house, the yard. The whole place. Willa let out a single dry laugh. "You want to fix the world's ugliest shack?" "You serious?" Caleb nodded once. "Calm, steady. I don't got much just to offer, but I can work, and I'd like to repay you for the fire and the bread, and for not looking at me like I'm a thing to fear." She didn't answer right away. Her throat tightened. No man had offered her anything in years, not without a price, not without a look in his eye that made her skin crawl. But Caleb's offer had no hunger in it, just stillness, just dignity. "You don't owe me a thing," she said softly. "You bled on my floor. That's payment enough." He gave a small smile. "Let me stay a week, just a week. I'll patch your roof. Rehang that door. Maybe get that chimney drawing again. He paused. Then I'll go. No trouble to you. Something about his tone unsettled her. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was so gentle it felt like truth. You're not like other men, she muttered. I ain't trying to be. That was when she noticed the bundle tied to his back. A rolled canvas, some tools, and on a small sack of nails. You were always planning to fix someone's house? She asked. No, he replied. I was planning to build one. He looked around, just didn't know where it would be. Willa's voice was thin when she said, This ain't much of a place to settle. Caleb looked around. At the leaning porch, at the crooked chimney, at the yard full of weeds where nothing grew anymore. It's got a soul, he said. That's more than I had yesterday. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Because what do you say to a man who calls your shame sacred? He didn't ask again. He just started. By noon, he'd swept the porch, pulled out the broken floorboard near the stove, and was whittling a new brace for the leg of her table. She brought him cool water. Watched the muscles move beneath his shirt as he worked. You do this for a living? She asked. Used to. He didn't look up. Before I got chased out of town for helping the wrong girl. She paused. What do you mean? He stood, looked her square in the face. Her paw didn't like that I was brown. The silence stretched. Then Willa said without hesitation, You can stay longer than a week, he smiled. And for the first time, it looked like something in him loosened. But before she could step back inside, he added something that stopped her mid-step. Your house ain't ugly, Willa. He said it quiet, like a confession. It's small, but it's kind, and when you told me I was bigger than it, I didn't cry because you were right. He looked at the ground. I cried because no one's ever let me feel safe in something smaller than me before. That's when she knew. He wasn't just building shelter. He was trying to build belonging. The next day, Willa watched from the kitchen window as Caleb hauled a heavy stack of rotted timber from the back wall of the cabin. He worked slow but deliberate, as if each plank were a memory he had to handle gently. Sweat rolled down his neck, soaking the frayed collar of his shirt, but his face was calm, focused. Willa stirred the pot of beans on the stove, her thoughts spiraling like wood smoke. She didn't know why she was still letting him stay. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was the way her shoulders relaxed when he was near. As if her bones remembered something she didn't. Just after noon, she stepped out with a tin cup of water and found him kneeling in the weeds, examining a pile of stone that used to be her garden wall. You planning to rebuild that? She asked. No, he said. This wall didn't fall. He ran his hand over the scattered rocks. Someone knocked it down. Willa frowned. The storm did it. Caleb shook his head. Storm don't knock over dry-laid stone unless the ground goes with it. And your soil's firm. He looked up at her. This wall was torn out piece by piece. She didn't answer, because she remembered now. Her brother, drunk angry, hurling stone after stone into the night, because the garden reminded him of their mother who died when Willa was 12. It wasn't the wind, she whispered. Caleb stood, brushed the dirt from his hands. Then why are you rebuilding everything but this? She turned her back to him, but her voice carried, because this wall was meant to keep things out. And I already know what that's like. Silence passed between them like a long shadow. Then Caleb said something so quiet she almost missed it. Some walls were made for protecting. Not hiding, she turned. You think I've been hiding? I think you're still living inside what other people left behind. That hit her like a hammer. Not in anger, but in recognition. He wasn't trying to insult her. He was naming what she couldn't. That night, as the stars pressed low and thick against the sky, she found him sitting at the edge of the garden stones, cleaning the grime from each one with a scrap of cloth. You don't have to do that, she said. They're just rocks. He didn't look up. You ever think maybe your mama laid these? Maybe your hands touched everyone. Willa swallowed hard. She used to hum when she planted. Said the earth listened better to music than to words. Caleb smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time the earth heard her voice again. The next morning, she found something she hadn't seen in years, a row of stones, not as a wall, but as a path, leading from her porch to the garden, as if he were guiding her back to something lost. She stepped barefoot onto the first stone, then another. The morning dew stung her toes, but she didn't stop. She walked the whole path, slow, steady, until she stood in the overgrown weeds that once held tomatoes, corn, and herbs she no longer remembered the names of. Caleb didn't say a word. He just watched from the shade of the barn. His expression unreadable, I think, she said aloud, though mostly to herself. I'd like to plant again. Then we'll plant, he said, as if there'd never been any question. But even as he spoke, his eyes flicked toward the forest, as if watching for something or someone. And that was when she realized, for all the work he did, all the peace he brought, there was still a story Caleb hadn't told, and it was following him, like a shadow. It was near sundown, on the third day when Willa saw the silhouette approaching. Lanky, crooked posture, a horse trailing behind. Caleb was splitting firewood behind the barn. But the moment he heard her gasp, he dropped the axe mid-swing and stepped around to the front. Like he already knew who it was, the man stopped at the edge of the property, just past the broken fence, and smiled with the kind of mouth that never told the truth. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Didn't expect to find you holed up with a woman." Caleb didn't move, didn't speak. Only the tightness in his jaw betrayed that he recognized him. "Friend of yours?" Willa asked cautiously. The man chuckled. "We're blood, kind of." He stepped closer. Old, maybe 60, white hair, scar running the length of his face, used to run together until he decided he'd grown a conscience. Caleb's voice was low, firm. "Turn around, Silas. You ain't welcome here." Silas clicked his tongue. So this is the mighty Caleb now. Playing house with some backwoods widow. He eyed the cabin. "Thought you were chasing something bigger." Willa stepped between them, heart pounding. "You've got no business here." "Move on," Silas laughed. "Again, she's got grit. I'll give her that." He looked past her, at Caleb. "But I ain't here for trouble. Just came to collect." Caleb stepped forward. "You got no claim on me." Silas's expression darkened. "That right?" He leaned against the fence post. "You forget who took the fall for you in Shiloh County? You walked." "I got 5 years in a box." He paused. 5 years thinking what you owed me." Willa felt the ground shift beneath her. "What is he talking about, Caleb?" Silas smirked. "Didn't tell her, did you?" He looked at Willa. "Your mountain man here killed a fella back in '59. Harrison Voss. Slave trader. Beat him to death with his bare hands." Caleb's voice was quiet, but steady. He tried to take 2 Cherokee women to auction. They were free. He didn't care. Silas shrugged. "You call that murder. I call it bad business." He met Caleb's eyes, "But I took the blame. Sat in a cage while you walked free." The silence burned hotter than any fire. Willa stared at Caleb, trying to reconcile the man who rebuilt her path with the one Silas described. "Is it true?" She whispered. Caleb didn't flinch, every word. "But I won't apologize for saving them." Silas pulled out a flask, took a swig, tossed it into the grass. "You owe me, brother. And I don't want money." He pointed at the cabin, at Willa. "I want this place. The land, all of it. You got 7 days to convince her to sell, or I'll take what I'm owed another way." Caleb's eyes darkened. "You touch her, and I'll bury you under her garden stones." Silas grinned. "That the old Caleb I hear? Maybe he ain't dead after all." With that, he sauntered back down the road, whistling a hymn that sounded like it came from hell itself. When he disappeared over the rise, Willa looked at Caleb. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to bring his shadow into your light," he said. "You're all that's good around here." She swallowed. "But if he comes back..." "He will," Caleb said. "And next time he won't be asking." The peace they'd been building cracked, like thin ice beneath a hoof. And somewhere behind Caleb's stillness, Willa saw something new in his eyes. Not fear, but a promise of war. If it came to that, Caleb didn't sleep that night. He stood by the door like an old statue, arms crossed listening to every wind shift, every distant coyote howl. Willa sat at the table, hands folded tight, candlelight turning her knuckles white. The cottage felt different now, less like a sanctuary, more like a target. "He's not done with us," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "He never is. Silas only knows how to burn what others build." Outside, the moon had dropped low enough to cast eerie shadows from the pines, and the wind dragged the past back with every breath. When morning broke, Caleb saddled his horse, but didn't ride. Instead, he led her down to the stone path Willa had walked. Each rock a labor of pain turned into purpose. He knelt there, ran his calloused fingers over the stones, and whispered something in a tongue she didn't understand. "What are you saying?" she asked. "Salagi," he said. "A blessing my mother taught me. For strength. For clarity when your enemy wears a familiar face." She knelt beside him, this place. It was meant to be quiet, safe. "We were healing here." Caleb met her eyes. "That's why he hates it." 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of Caleb leaving at dawn, returning at dusk, his hands dirtier each time, his eyes harder. Willa watched him go that first morning, watched him climb onto the wagon Silas had sent, watched him disappear down the ridge road, and felt something inside her crack, not break. Crack like ice over a river in early spring. She stood on the porch until the wagon was just a speck. Then she went inside and got to work, because if Caleb was going to sacrifice for her, then she damn well wasn't going to sit idle. The first thing she did was climb back onto that wobbly chair, the one she'd been standing on the night he knocked. She grabbed the hammer, the shingle, and this time she didn't miss. The nail went in clean. Straight true. She stared at it. Her thumb didn't even hurt. "Huh," she said to the empty room, and climbed down. By noon, she'd patched 3 more holes. By evening, she'd rehung the crooked cabinet door that had been hanging by one hinge since Matthias left. When Caleb came home that night, he stopped in the doorway, stared. "You fixed the cabinet," he said. She wiped her hands on her apron. "I did." He looked at her. Really looked. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said. "But I wanted to." He set down the sack he was carrying. Flour, sugar, things she hadn't seen in months. "Silas paid you?" she asked. He nodded. Didn't meet her eyes. "What'd he have you do?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Collecting debts. From folks who can't pay." She felt her stomach turn. "You hurt anyone?" "No." His voice was firm. "I stood there. And when folks got skarking, I just stood there." He looked at his hands. "Didn't have to touch nobody. They just saw me in. And they paid." Will across the room took his hands in hers. They were cold, shaking. "This ain't you," she said. "I know." "Then why?" He finally met her eyes. "Because I got 6 more days, and then you keep your house, and I can stop being the thing people fear." She wanted to argue, to tell him there had to be another way. But the flour on the table, the sugar, the beans, and salt pork he'd brought home, those were things she needed, things she couldn't afford. So instead she said, "Let me clean you up." She heated water, poured it into the basin, washed his hands, his face, his neck. He sat there like a child, eyes closed, breathing slow. When she was done, he whispered, "Thank you," and she realized. This was what love looked like, when you were too tired to call it by name. The second week was worse. Caleb came home with a split lip, knuckles raw. He didn't say what happened, just sat by the fire staring. Willa didn't ask. She just brought him water salve. "A clean rag." "You fought someone," she said. Not a question. A fact. He nodded. "Man wouldn't pay." Started swinging. "I had to. I had to stop him." "Did you stop him?" Caleb looked at her. "Yeah. I stopped him." The way he said it made her blood run cold. "Caleb," he stood, walked to the door, pressed his forehead against the wood. "I'm becoming what he wants," he whispered. "I can feel it. Every day I'm out there. Every time I stand behind him while he threatens folks. I'm becoming the thing I ran from." Willa crossed to him, put her hand on his back. "No, you're not." "How do you know?" "Because you came back. Because you hate it. Because you're still you, he turned. Looked down at her. What if I'm not? What if when this is over? I can't remember who I was before. She took his face in her hands. Then I'll remind you, and she kissed him, soft, gentle. Like she was trying to pull him back from wherever he'd gone. When she pulled away, he was crying. I don't deserve you, he said. Good thing I don't care what you deserve. That night they slept side by side, not touching, just close enough to know the other was there. And for the first time in days, Caleb slept through the night. On the third day of the second week, Willa made a decision. She was done waiting. She put on her good dress, the one she'd worn to marry Matthias, the one she'd packed away 3 years ago and thought she'd never wear again. It still fit barely. She'd lost weight. But it fit. She walked 5 miles to town. To the church, the small wooden building at the edge of the square, where Father Lucian held Sunday services. Her feet ached by the time she got there. Blisters forming, but she didn't stop. She pushed open the door. Father Lucian looked up from the altar. He was old. 67, if she remembered right. Hair white as snow. Eyes kind, Willa Thorne, he said. Surprise in his voice. I haven't seen you in, my goodness. 3 years? She nodded. I need help, Father. He set down the Bible he'd been reading, walked toward her. What kind of help? She told him everything. About Caleb's, about Silas, about the debt, about the 7 days. When she was done, Father Lucian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Silas Thorne is a complicated man. I don't care about complicated. I care about stopping him, the priest sighed, Willa. I can't give you money. The church doesn't have it. And even if we did, I'm not asking for money. He raised an eyebrow. Then what are you asking for? She met his eyes. I'm asking you to talk to him. You knew Matthias. You knew Silas. You married me and Matthias in this very church. She took a breath. Maybe if he hears it from you, that what he's doing is wrong. Maybe he'll stop. Father Lucian looked sad, Willa. I've known Silas since he was a boy. And I can tell you, he's not a man who listens to reason. Not anymore. Then what does he listen to? The priest hesitated. Then he said something that made Willa's blood run cold. Pain. He listens to pain. Because it's the only language he's spoken for 5 years. She left the church with no answers. Just more questions. And a weight in her chest that felt like stone. On the walk home, she passed Widow Kern's cabin. The old woman was sitting on her porch, shelling peas. Willa Thorne. She called out. You look like you've seen a ghost. Willa stopped. Maybe I have. Widow Kern gestured to the empty chair beside her. Sit. Tell me. Willa hesitated, then climbed the steps, sat. Took a handful of peas and started shelling. It felt good, the rhythm, the simplicity. I got a man, Willa said after a while. Widow Kern smiled. I know. Whole town knows. Big fella. Quiet. Fixes things. Willa nodded. He's in trouble. What kind? The kind that makes good men do bad things. Widow Kern was quiet. Then she said, I lost 3 sons in the war. Did you know that? Willa shook her head. 3 boys, all under 25. 1 at Antietam, 1 at Gettysburg, 1 at some place I can't even pronounce. She set down the peas. After the 3rd one died, I thought I'd die too. Thought my heart would just stop. She looked at Willa. But it didn't. And you know what I learned? What? That the heart's stronger than we think. It keeps beating even when we don't want it to. Even when we think we can't go on. She reached over, patted Willa's hand. Your man. He'll find his way. And if he don't, you'll find it for him. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. What if I can't? Then you'll try, and trying. That's all any of us can do. When Willa got home, Caleb was already there, sitting on the porch, staring at the mountains. She sat beside him. Didn't say anything, just sat. After a while, he said, I saw Silas today. What'd he say? He said 4 more days, and then we're square. Willa nodded. 4 more days. Caleb looked at her. You went to town. I did. Why? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, because I'm tired of waiting for someone to save me. Even you. He smiled, sad. But real. Good. You shouldn't wait for me. You should. You should save yourself. She took his hand. What if I don't want to do it alone? He squeezed her fingers. Then we'll do it together. And for the first time in 2 weeks, Willa felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. On the 4th day, Willa found the letter. She was cleaning out the old trunk in the corner, the one Matthias had brought when they first moved in, the one she hadn't opened since he died. It was at the bottom, beneath his uniform, beneath the tintype photograph of them on their wedding day, beneath everything. A letter, addressed to her, in Matthias's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Willa, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry, not for dying. I can't control that, but for leaving you with this house, this debt, this life. I borrowed money from Silas, more than I should have. I thought I could pay it back, thought the land would be worth something, thought we'd build a life here, but I was wrong, so I'm asking you, begging you, sell the house, take what you can, and leave. Don't stay for me. Don't stay for memories. You deserve more than broken wood and broken dreams. If a man named Caleb Stone comes looking for you, trust him. He saved my life once. Maybe he can save yours too. All my love, Matthias. Willa read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, set it on the table, and walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. She stood in the middle of the yard, looked at the house, the crooked porch, the patched roof, the windows that didn't quite close right, and she realized Matthias had been wrong. The house wasn't a burden, it was a choice, and she was choosing to stay, not for him. Not for Caleb, for herself. When Caleb came home that night, she showed him the letter. He read it in silence, then looked up. He wanted you to leave, I know. Are you going to? She shook her head. No, because this house, it's not about him anymore. It's about me, about what I can build, what I can become. Caleb smiled. Then we'll build it together. But even as he said it, his eyes were haunted. And Willa knew. 3 more days. 3 more days and this would be over. Or it would destroy them. The 5th day was the worst. Caleb didn't come home. Willa waited on the porch until midnight. Then she went inside, laid down, but didn't sleep. At dawn she heard the wagon. Ran outside. Caleb climbed down slowly. His shirt was torn, blood on his collar. Not his. She didn't ask. Just helped him inside, sat him down, cleaned the blood. When she was done, he finally spoke. Man pulled a knife. Said he'd rather die than pay Silas. So Silas told me to make him regret it. Willa's hands froze. What did you do? Caleb looked at her, eyes hollow. I broke his arm. Heard it snap, he screamed. And I just stood there. He put his head in his hands. I'm a monster. Willa knelt in front of him, took his face in her hands. No, you're not. You're a man in an impossible situation. And you're doing what you have to protect me. But at what cost? She didn't have an answer because she didn't know that night. She made a decision. She was going to end this not in 3 days. Now, the next morning, she put on her good dress again, packed a small bag, and walked to town to Silas's office. It was above the general store. A dark room that smelled like whiskey and tobacco. She knocked. Come in. A voice called. She pushed open the door. Silas sat behind a desk, papers scattered, bottle of whiskey half empty. He looked up, surprised. Well. The widow Thorne. To what do I owe the pleasure? She stepped inside. Close the door, I came to make a deal. He leaned back in his chair, smiled. I'm listening. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small leather pouch, set it on the desk. $300. It's all I have. I sold half my land to the Hendersons down the road. Silas picked up the pouch, weighed it in his hand. This ain't 600, I know. But it's a start, and I'll give you the rest. But not in 3 days. In 6 months. With interest, he laughed. And why would I agree to that? She leaned forward, hands on the desk. Because if you don't, I'm going to tell everyone in this town what you're doing. How you're extorting farmers, threatening families, using Caleb as your enforcer. His smile faded. You think anyone will believe you? I think they'll listen. Because I'm Matthias Thorne's widow. And Matthias saved half the men in this county during the war. They owe him. Which means they owe me. Silas stared at her, silent. Then he said, "You got guts. I'll give you that." He tossed the pouch back to her. "But I don't want your money." Her heart sank. "Then what do you want?" He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street below. "I want him, Caleb?" "No," he turned. "I want Matthias. I want my brother back. I want the war to have never happened. I want 5 years of my life back." His voice cracked. "But I can't have any of that. So instead I get to watch you and your mountain man play house in the home my brother built. And I get to hate you for it." Willa felt something break inside her. Not fear, understanding. "You're not angry at me," she said softly. "You're angry at him, at Matthias. For dying. For leaving you alone." Silas didn't answer. Just poured himself another drink. "Get out," he said. "Silas, get out." She picked up the pouch and left when she got home. Caleb was waiting. "Where were you?" She told him everything. About the money, Silas. About what he'd said. When she was done. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "He's not going to let this go, I know. So what do we do?" Willa looked at him, at this man who'd knelt at her door, who'd rebuilt her path, who'd sacrificed his soul for her house. And she said, "We fight." How? She didn't know. But as the sun set and the shadows grew long, she made a promise to herself. Whatever happened next, she wasn't going to lose. Not her house, not Caleb, not herself. The 7th day came. Dawn broke cold. Frost on the ground, breath visible in the air. Willa woke before Caleb. She, dressed quietly, grabbed the pouch of money and walked to the barn. Inside, high beneath a loose board, was something she'd kept secret. Her father's old revolver. She'd never fired it. Never even held it since he died. But she took it now, checked the chamber. 5 bullets. She loaded the 6th, closed the cylinder, and tucked it into her coat. When she came back inside, Caleb was awake. He saw the bulge in her coat. "Willa, don't. You can't. I can. And I will." He stood cross to her. "This ain't your fight." She looked up at him. "Yes, it is. Because it's my house, my debt, my life." She took his hand. "You've carried this long enough. Let me carry it now." He wanted to argue. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't, because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. They walked to town together, side by side. No words, just breath, just heartbeats, just the sound of their boots on frozen ground. When they reached Silas's office, the door was already open. Silas sat at his desk, same as before. But this time, 2 men stood behind him, armed, right on time. Silas said. Willa stepped forward, set the pouch on the desk. 300 now. 306 months. Silas didn't touch it, I told you. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? He stood. Walked around the desk, stopped in front of Caleb. "I want you to beg Silence." "What?" Caleb said. "I want you, on your knees, begging me to forgive the debt." In front of these men. In front of her, he smiled. "Cruel. Do that. And we're square." Willa felt her hand move to the gun in her coat, but Caleb caught her wrist, held it, then he let go and dropped to his knees. "No," Willa whispered. But he didn't look at her. He looked at Silas. "I'm begging you," he said, voice steady. "Forgive the debt." Silas laughed louder. "I'm begging you. Please, forgive the debt." Again, Willa couldn't watch. She turned away, but Caleb kept going, over and over, until his voice broke, until tears ran down his face, until Silas finally said, "Enough." Caleb stopped, head bowed, shoulders shaking. Silas looked at Willa. "Debt's forgiven. Take your man, and get out of my sight." But as they turned to leave, Silas said one more thing. "Willa." She stopped. "Matthias would be ashamed of you for choosing him over the house he built." Something inside her snapped. She turned, pulled the revolver, and pointed it at Silas's chest. The 2 men behind him drew their guns. But she didn't flinch. "Matthias," she said, voice cold, "would be ashamed of you for becoming the man who breaks what he used to build." Silas stared at her. "You won't shoot. You're right." "I won't." She lowered the gun. "Because you're not worth the bullet, or the guilt, or the years I'd lose to prison." She looked him in the eye. "But know this. You didn't win today. You just proved that you're exactly what I thought. A bitter old man who can't let go of the past. She helped Caleb to his feet, and walked out behind them. Silas stood in silence. The pouch of money still on his desk, untouched. They didn't speak on the walk home. Didn't touch, just walked. When they reached the house, Caleb sat on the porch steps, put his head in his hands. Willa sat beside him. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For making you see that. For letting him. She put her hand on his. "You did what you had to. And now it's over." He looked at her. "Is it?" She didn't know. But as the sun climbed higher, and the frost began to melt, she made another promise. Whatever came next, they would face it, together. That night, they didn't light the fire, didn't eat, just sat in the dark holding hands. And somewhere in that darkness, Willa whispered, "I love you." Caleb didn't answer, but he squeezed her hand. And that, for now, was enough. 3 days later, a knock came at the door. Willa opened it. Father Lucian stood there, foot grave. "What is it?" she asked. "It's Silas. He's asking for you." "Why?" The priest hesitated. "He's dying." Willa felt her world tilt. "What?" "Consumption, the doctor says he's got. Maybe a week, maybe less." She looked back at Caleb. He stood in the doorway. Silent. He wants to see you both," Father Lucian said. Before the end, Willa didn't want to go. Didn't want to see the man who'd humiliated Caleb, who'd threatened everything they'd built. But something in her, something she couldn't name, said yes. They went to Silas's cabin the next morning. It was small, dark, smelled like death. He lay in bed, skin gray, eyes sunken, but still sharp. "You came," he said. Voice weak. Willa nodded. "Father Lucian said you wanted to see us." Silas coughed. Long wet when it stopped. He said, "I'm dying, we know." He looked at Caleb. "I'm sorry for what I did. For what I made you do." Caleb didn't respond. Silas turned to Willa. "The debt. It's gone. Burned the papers last night. You're free." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "Why?" Because Matthias would have wanted it, and I spent too long hating him for dying. Hating you for living." He coughed again. "But I'm tired. Tired of hating. Tired of everything." He reached out, a trembling hand. Willa took it. "Forgive me," he whispered. She wanted to say no, wanted to hold on to the anger. But she couldn't. "I forgive you," she said, and meant it. Silas closed his eyes. "Thank you." When they left, Father Lucian was waiting outside. "He won't last the night," he said. Willa nodded. "I know." They walked home in silence. And when the sun set, when the stars came out, Willa stood on the porch and wondered if forgiveness was supposed to feel this heavy, or if that was just what healing felt like. Silas Thorne died 3 days later. They buried him next to Matthias in the small cemetery at the edge of town. Willa and Caleb stood at the graveside, watching as Father Lucian said the final prayers. When it was over, everyone left except them. Willa knelt, placed a single wildflower on Silas's grave. "Rest now," she whispered. "You've earned it." Caleb helped her to her feet. They stood there a moment longer. Then turned and walked home, to the house that had survived it all. The house that was finally, truly, Thier's spring came late that year. March bled into April with frozen ground and gray skies that refused to break. But when it finally came, when the sun finally pushed through, it came all at once. Green exploding across the ridge, wildflowers dotting the meadow, birds returning to nests they'd abandoned the winter before. Willa stood in the garden, the one Caleb had marked with stones, the one her mother had planted decades ago. She held seeds in her palm, tomato, beans, squash, things she hadn't planted in 3 years. Because what was the point of planting when you lived alone? But she wasn't alone anymore. Caleb knelt beside her, digging furrows with his hands. No tools, just hands, like he wanted to feel the earth. "You think they'll grow?" she asked. He looked up, dirt on his face, smile in his eyes. "They'll grow, how do you know?" "Because you're planting them. And everything you touch, it grows." That afternoon, while Caleb worked on replacing the barn door, Willa walked to Widow Kern's cabin. She hadn't seen the old woman in weeks, not since before Silas died. She knocked, no answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Her stomach turned. She pushed the door open. Mrs. Kern? The cabin was dark, cold. She stepped inside and saw her widow Kern in her chair by the fire. Eyes closed, hands folded, gone. Willa's breath caught. She crossed the room, knelt beside the chair, touched the old woman's hand, cold, stiff. She'd been dead for days, maybe a week. Willa felt tears burn her eyes. Not because she'd been close to Widow Kern, they hadn't been, but because the old woman had died alone, just like Willa almost had. On the table beside the chair, a letter. Addressed to Willa. She picked it up, unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. Dear Willa, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm glad, not because I wanted to die, but because I'm tired, and I'm ready. I'm leaving you my cabin, and the land. It's not much, but it's yours. Maybe you and that man of yours can use it. Maybe you can't either way. It's yours. Don't cry for me. I lived a full life, lost too much, but loved more, and that's all any of us can hope for. Your friend, Constance Kern. Willa sat on the floor, letter in her lap, and wept. Not for Widow Kern, but for herself. For the life she'd almost lost, for the love she'd almost missed. When Caleb found her an hour later, she was still sitting there. He didn't ask, just sat beside her, put his arm around her, and held her while she cried. They buried Widow Kern beside her 3 sons. In the cemetery on the hill, Father Lucian said the prayers. A handful of townspeople came. Not many, but enough after the service. Willa and Caleb walked to the edge of the cemetery, looked out over the valley. She left me her cabin, Willa said. Caleb nodded. I know. I saw the letter. What am I supposed to do with 2 houses? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, maybe it's not about what you're supposed to do. Maybe it's about what you could do. She looked at him. What do you mean? He turned to face her. There's people out there, like me, like you were, who got nowhere to go, no one to turn to. He paused. Maybe we could give them a place. Willa's heart skipped. You mean turn the cabin into what? A refuge? Something like that. A place where people can heal, get back on their feet. She stared at him. That's a big idea. I know. We don't have money. We don't need much. Just a roof, a fire, some food. He took her hands. We could do it. Together, Willa thought about it. About the nights she'd spent alone. About the desperation, the fear. About Caleb kneeling at her door. About Silas dying bitter and broken. About Widow Kern dying alone. And she realized, maybe this was the point, not just to survive, but to make sure others could too. Okay, she said, okay, let's do it. Caleb smiled, picked her up, spun her around. And for the first time in months, Willa laughed, really laughed. They spent the next week cleaning out Widow Kern's cabin, sweeping, scrubbing, airing out the rooms. It was smaller than Willa's house, just 2 rooms. But it was sturdy, solid. The roof didn't leak, the floor didn't sag. It was perfect. On the 5th day, as Willa was washing the windows, she heard horses. She looked up, 3 riders, coming up the ridge road. Her stomach tightened, but Caleb stepped outside. Calm. It's okay, he said. The riders stopped, dismounted. 2 men, 1 woman, all Cherokee. The woman stepped forward. She was young, maybe 20, scar across her cheek, eyes hard but kind. Caleb Stone, she said. He nodded. Ayanna. Willa's breath caught. This was the girl, the one Caleb had saved. The one Silas had gone to prison for. Ayanna looked at Willa. You must be the woman who saved him. Willa blinked. I didn't save anyone. Ayanna smiled. That's not what I heard. She turned to Caleb. We heard about Silas, about what happened. We came to say thank you. Caleb shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Yes, we do. You gave us our lives back. The least we can do is help you build something here. She gestured to the 2 men. We can work. We can hunt. We can stay. If you'll have us. Willa looked at Caleb. He looked at her. And without a word, they both knew this was it. This was the beginning. We'll have you, Willa said. And Ayanna's smile, it could have lit the whole valley. Over the next month, more people came, a man who'd lost his farm to debt, A woman who'd fled an abusive husband. A pair of brothers who'd deserted from the army and had nowhere else to go. One by one, they showed up at Willa's door. And one by one, she let them in. Some stayed a week, some stayed a month, stayed longer. But all of them left different than they came. Stronger, healed Ridity. Caleb built beds, chairs. Willa cooked, cleaned, listened, and together, they created something neither of them had expected. A family, not by blood, but by choice. One evening in late May. As the sun set over the ridge, Willa stood on the porch of her house. Watching in the yard, Ayanna was teaching the younger children how to weave baskets. The two brothers were chopping wood. The woman who'd fled her husband was hanging laundry. Singeing in, Caleb was sitting on the porch of Widow Kern's cabin. Carving something. She walked over, sat beside him. "What are you making?" He held it up, a wooden sign, letters burned into the surface. "HLD for the cabin," he said, thought it deserved a name. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect." He set it down, took her hand. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I spent my whole life looking for a place big enough to hold me. Turns out I just needed a place small enough to feel like home." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They sat there as the sun dipped below the mountains, as the stars came out, as the sounds of laughter and life filled the air around them. And Willa thought this is what Matthias wanted. Not a house, a home, not just for her, but for everyone who needed one. In June, a letter delivered by a writer from town addressed to Willa Thorne. She opened it, right at her hands, shook. Caleb looked up from the garden. "What is it?" She couldn't speak, just handed him the letter. He read it, then looked at her. "They want to make this official. The territory governor. He wants to recognize this as a refuge?" Willa nodded. "They'll give us funding, supplies, protection." Caleb set down the letter. "What do you want to do?" She thought about it. About staying small, staying hidden. About the safety of obscurity. But then she thought about the people who'd come through. The ones who still needed help. And she knew, "I want to say yes." Caleb smiled. "Then we say yes." The official recognition came in August. A ceremony in town, the territorial governor himself, shaking Willa's hand. Shaking Caleb's, calling them heroes. Willa didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a woman who'd opened a door, and kept it open. But when the governor handed her the charter, when he said the words, "Held House, a refuge for the lost and broken," she felt something else, pride, not in herself, but in what they'd built. After the ceremony, as they rode back to the ridge, Caleb said, "You know what this means?" "What?" "More people, more responsibility, more everything." Willa nodded. "I know." "You scared?" She thought about it, then she said, "No, because I'm not doing it alone." He reached over, squeezed her hand. "No, you're not." By the end of summer, Held House was full. 12 people, living, working, healing. Willa had never been so tired, or so happy. One night in September, after everyone had gone to bed, she sat on the porch with Caleb. The night was cool, the stars bright. "You ever think about what would have happened," she said, "if you hadn't knocked that night?" Caleb was quiet for a long time, then he said, "Yeah, I think about it and I think I'd still be out there. Running, hiding, hating myself." He looked at her. "You saved me, Willa." "Not the other way around." She shook her head. "We saved each other, maybe." He stood, held out his hand. "Come here. I want to show you something." She took his hand, followed him to the barn. Inside, he lit a lantern, and there, in the corner, was something covered with a tarp. He pulled it off. It was a rocking chair, beautiful, hand-carved, smooth wood that gleamed in the lamplight. "You made this?" she asked. He nodded. "For you. For the baby." Willa froze. "What baby?" He looked at her, confused, "I thought. I mean, you've been tired. And sick in the mornings." "I just assumed." She stared at him, her mind racing, tired. Sick? She'd thought it was stress, just exhaustion from everything. But now that he said it, now that she thought about it, her hand went to her stomach. Oh my God. Caleb's eyes widened. You didn't know? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. Is it okay? Are you happy? She pulled back, looked at him. Happy? Caleb, I'm terrified. Why? Because I'm 38 years old. Because I've never been a mother. Because what if I can't? What if I'm not good enough? He took her face in his hands, Willa. You've been a mother to every person who's walked through that door. You've fed them, sheltered them, loved them. He smiled. You're going to be amazing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to push past the fear. But all she could think was, what if I lose this too? The pregnancy was hard, harder than Willa expected. By October, she was bedridden most days. Weak, dizzy. The doctor came from town, examined her, shook his head. You're older, he said. And your body. It's been through a lot. He looked at Caleb. She needs rest. Complete rest. No work. No stress. Caleb nodded. She'll rest. But Willa protested. I can't just lie here. There's too much to do. Then we'll do it, Ayanna said from the doorway. She stepped into the room, followed by the others, the woman who'd fled her husband, the brothers, the man who'd lost his farm. All of them. You gave us a home, Ayanna said. Let us take care of you. And they did. They cooked, cleaned, held house, while Willa lay in bed, watching through the window, as her family, her chosen family, kept everything running. In November, the baby stopped moving. Willa woke in the middle of the night, cold, terrified. She put her hand on her stomach, waited. Nothing, Caleb, she whispered. He was beside her in an instant. What's wrong? The baby. It's not moving. He pressed his ear to her stomach, listened, his face went pale. I'll get the doctor. He rode through the night, brought the doctor back at dawn. The old man examined her, listened, felt. Finally, he looked up. The baby's alive. But it's weak. You need to prepare yourself. It might not make it. Willa closed her eyes, felt the tears come. How long? A month, maybe less, if you can carry to term. There's a chance. After he left, Willa lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Caleb sat beside her, holding her hand. I can't lose this, she whispered. You won't. You don't know that. No, but I know you, and I know. I know you're strong enough to fight. She turned her head, looked at him. What if fighting isn't enough? He didn't answer, because he didn't have one. December came with snow. Heavy snow that buried the ridge, that trapped them inside, that made the world feel small and suffocating. Willa's belly grew, but the baby barely moved. She counted kicks, 1 in the morning, 2 at night if she was lucky. The doctor came once a week. Each time he looked more worried. Any day now, he said in mid-December. The baby could come any day, and Willa prayed. Prayed like she hadn't prayed since Matthias died. Prayed to God, to her mother, to anyone who would listen, please. Please let this baby live. On December 23rd, the contractions started, slow at first, then faster, harder. Caleb sent Ayanna for the doctor, but the snow was too deep. The roads impassable. They were alone. Caleb held Willa's hand. Ayanna boiled water. The woman who'd fled her husband, her name was Clara. She'd delivered 3 babies back east. I can help, she said. And she did. She guided Willa through each contraction, each push, each scream. Hours passed, the sun set, rose again. And still the baby didn't come. Willa was fading. She could feel it, her vision blurring, her strength gone. I can't, she whispered. Caleb leaned close. Yes, you can. I'm so tired, I know, but you're almost there. One more push. Just one more. She looked at him, at this man who'd knelt at her door, who'd rebuilt her life, who was begging her to fight, and she pushed. The baby came at dawn. A girl. Tiny came dawn. Silent. Clara took her, rubbed her back, patted her chest. Nothing. Willa's heart stopped. No. But then a sound, soft, weak, a cry. The baby cried. And Willa sobbed. Clara wrapped the baby in a blanket, placed her in Willa's arms. She's small, Clara said, but she's breathing. Willa looked down at this tiny, fragile thing. This miracle. Hello, she whispered. The baby opened her eyes, dark, like Caleb's, and Willa felt her heart break open, in the best way. They named her Hope because that's what she was, hope. That the broken could be whole, that the lost could be found, that even in the darkest winter spring would come. Hope grew slowly, too. Slowly. She didn't cry much. Didn't eat much. The doctor came as soon as the roads cleared, examined her, shook his head. She's small. Weak. Her lungs, they're not fully developed. He looked at Willa. I don't know if she'll make it through the winter. Willa held her daughter closer. She will, Mrs. Thorne. She will. Because I won't let her go. And she didn't. She stayed awake through the nights, nursing. Rocking, singing songs her mother had sung. Caleb sat beside her, keeping the fire going, bringing food, water, whatever she needed. And slowly, so slowly, Hope got stronger. By February, she was crying louder, eating more. By March, she was smiling, and by April, when the snow melted and the wildflowers returned, she was laughing. Willa stood in the garden, Hope strapped to her chest in a sling Ayanna had made. She knelt, planted seeds, the same ones she'd planted the year before. Tomato, beans, squash. But this time she wasn't alone. Caleb knelt beside her. Ayanna and the others worked nearby. And Hope gurgled and cooed, reaching for the dirt, for the sun, for life. You think she'll remember this? Caleb asked. Willa smiled. No, but we will, and that was enough. One warm day in May, a knock came at the door. Willa opened it. A woman stood there, young, maybe 25, holding a baby. Her eyes were desperate. Scared, please, she said. I heard this was a place for people who got nowhere else. Willa looked at the woman, at the baby, at the fear and hope mixed together in her eyes. And she smiled. It is. Come in. She stepped aside. The woman hesitated, then crossed the threshold. And Willa thought, this is why we're here, not just to survive, but to hold the door open for everyone who needs it. That night, after the woman and her baby were settled, after everyone had gone to bed, Willa sat on the porch with Caleb, Hope asleep in her arms. The stars were bright, the air warm. Perfect. You know what I realized? Willa said. What? The night you knocked. I thought I was letting in a stranger. She looked at him, but I wasn't. I was letting in everything I'd been too scared to hope for. Caleb reached over, touched Hope's tiny hand. She wrapped her fingers around his. I used to think, he said, that I was too big for the world, that I'd never fit. He looked at Willa. But you taught me. You taught me it's not about fitting. It's about finding the people who make room. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. We made room for each other, yeah. We did. They sat in silence, listening to the night, to the sounds of life around them, and Willa thought Matthias had been wrong. The house wasn't just wood and nails. It was every person who walked through the door, every meal shared, every story told, every tear shed. It was Caleb kneeling in the rain. It was Silas finding peace in death. It was Widow Kern's last gift. It was Ayanna's smile. It was Hope's first cry. It was everything. Years later, when Hope was grown, when Willa's hair had gone gray, and Caleb's beard was white, when Held House had sheltered hundreds, when their story had become legend, people would ask, how did you do it? How did you build all this? And Willa would smile, take Caleb's hand, and say, we didn't build it. We just opened the door and kept it open for everyone who needed a place to heal, because that was the truth. You don't build a home by keeping people out. You build it by letting them in, by making room, by choosing love over fear every single day. And when you do that, when you really do that, the house doesn't leak anymore, not because the roof is fixed, but because the people inside, they're holding it up, together. The end came not with fanfare, but with quiet. Willa and Caleb, old now, sitting on the porch of the house that had held them through everything. Hope was inside grown, with children of her own. Runging, Held House now, carrying on what her parents had started. You tired? Caleb asked. Willa nodded. A little, me too. They sat in silence, watching the sunset. Like they had 1,000 times before. You ever regret it? Caleb asked. letting me in that night? Willa looked at him, at this man who'd knelt at her door, who'd rebuilt her world, who'd given her everything. Not once, she said, not even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. She took his hand, because that's when I knew. I knew it was real. He squeezed her fingers. I think about that night sometimes. About how close I came to just walking past. Why didn't you? Because I saw the light in your window, and I thought maybe there's still kindness in the world. Willa smiled. And was there? More than I ever deserved. The sun dipped below the mountains. The stars began to appear, one by one. You know what the best part was? Willa said. What? We got to grow old together. Not everyone gets that. Caleb nodded. No, they don't. They sat until the stars filled the sky, until the night wrapped around them like a blanket. And somewhere in that darkness, in that peace, they both knew this was enough, more than enough. It was everything. And when morning came, when hope found them still sitting there, hands clasped, eyes closed, smiles on their faces, she didn't cry. She just looked at the house, at the sign HCLD, and whispered, "Thank you," because they'd taught her that love isn't measured in years, but in moments, in choices, in doors held open, and that was the greatest gift of all. The house still stands, on the ridge, above the valley. People still come seeking shelter, seeking hope, and the door. It's always open because some legacies aren't built in stone. They're built in stories, in kindness passed down in love that refuses to die. And as long as there are people who remember, who carry on, who open their doors, the house will never fall. It will stand, held up not by nails and wood, but by the truth Willa and Caleb learned, that we're all bigger than our houses and smaller than our love. And that's okay, because in the end, it's not the size of the space, it's what we choose to fill it with. And they chose every day to fill it with grace, with mercy, with hope. And that made all the difference.